Welcome back to Drawn to Darkness, a bi-weekly podcast where we discuss our favorite horror and true crime. My name is Annie, and I'll be introducing Caroline to my favorite horror movies, podcasts, TV shows, and books.
And my name is Caroline, and I'll be doing the same from the true crime perspective.
Caroline, before we get into this, I want to ask you, have you ever been followed?
Gosh, if I have, I was unaware.
So you survived it, if you have.
Well, yes, clearly I've survived everything.
Yes.
That has happened to me. But no, I'm not aware of ever being followed. Actually, there was one time when we were up in the lake house and my youngest wouldn't sleep, and I got so frustrated that I threw him in the backseat of the car and started driving down the road, and then I convinced myself someone was following me, but when I pulled over, they just drove past me, so...
I think that's what happened to me. I convinced myself I was being followed. I was babysitting, and this was at a time when I was very into urban legends. I think probably urban legend had recently come out. I was very aware of the calls coming from inside the house legend. There was a time when I was babysitting and my boyfriend knew where I was and put one of those red laser pointers that you can get your cat to chase.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, the killer's in the backseat, all that stuff. So I left this house I was babysitting and somebody was following me. Now, I lived pretty much on the highway, so the likelihood is that they were just heading out of town and happened to be on the same route as me. But I scared the shit out of myself and drove to the police station and sat in the parking lot. And then they continued on their way. So...
I mean, well, your instincts are strong. Very good survival instincts to drive to the police station. I just pulled over on the side of the road. I would have been pretty screwed if the person was actually following me.
Pull over on the side of the road to make it really easy for them to murder you, especially in the woods in New Hampshire.
Yeah, but as far as urban legends go, like the one with the flashing lights absolutely was the one that terrified me the most.
I'm still scared of that if I'm on like a road at night with not a lot of light. I think about that to this day. Well, the movie we're going to talk about today, if you haven't already guessed, is... Actually, you don't need to guess. We told you last week. It's It Follows. Spoiler reminders, we will be talking exactly about what happens in this movie. So if you have a problem with that, go off and watch it and come back. Okay? Pausing for you to do that. Here we go. David Robert Mitchell's film, It Follows, is the story of me and my dog in my house. But ching. Just kidding. It's about a teenage girl named Jay who discovers after sleeping with her new boyfriend Hugh that he has deliberately passed on a sexually transmitted curse that will relentlessly pursue and ultimately kill her if she doesn't pass it on by having sex with someone else. And if it kills her, it will come back for Hugh and then to whoever gave it to him, and so on. So basically, Jay has caught a supernatural STD. It's unstoppable, it's relentless, it can appear as anyone, including someone you know and love, and there doesn't seem to be a way to beat it. So, Caroline, what adjective would you use to describe this movie?
I mean, it's boring to say, but it's definitely creepy. The actors convey the creepy eeriness factor very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would go with unsettling, menacing, and nightmarish. I think there's a real dreamlike quality because of the details of the setting that really don't make sense. So I wanted to start with setting when we talk about this and how that contributes to this creepy, menacing, dreadful, nightmarish feel that we're talking about here. So it's set in Detroit. It starts in a suburb. It's grim. It feels kind of semi-abandoned, which reminds me a lot of Barbarian. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
No.
Well, we'll have to watch that someday because it is also set in
add it to the list.
Detroit. It's an Airbnb situation where two people end up at the same Airbnb with frightening consequences. It also reminded me of Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh, interesting. How?
Well, I think Jay looks like Summer. And,
oh, yeah.
The cars are really old and everything's kind of run down. And I don't know, there's like granny crochet blankets and an old TV with an antenna, above ground pools. It's just got this dated feel that reminds me of Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah, I was actually a little bit curious about the year, looking at the cars and everything. The main movie that I think and associate Detroit with is 8 Mile. There was a lot of, oh, this is familiar, these abandoned houses where bad things can occur and or you could hide out, I suppose, if you need to.
I think there's another movie and I can't remember what it's called. I'll have to look it up. But I think it's also set in Detroit in a kind of semi-abandoned neighborhood. Another horror movie where this group of people in their 20s target a blind man living in one of those abandoned houses because they think he's got money. And again, it ends in disaster. But it's awesome. It's a really great movie. Again, add it to the list, if I can remember the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then at the same time, they have weird modern details, like the scallop shell phone e-reader that Yara is using all the time. Do you remember that?
And also, I was very confused about what season is it, because there's a bunch of scenes where the outfits of the different characters do not match temperature-wise. The main girl especially is wearing essentially nothing, and the dudes are in like layers of jackets, you know, like a flannel with a Jordan Catalano-esque jacket over top.
Yes, Greg's stonewashed jean jacket is very Jordan Catalano. Absolutely.
Right?
And Hugh, the boyfriend, with his goatee and his hair and his earring, it took me a while to figure out who he reminded me of, but I think it's Brian from the Backstreet Boys.
Yeah. It definitely had a 90s vibe, for sure.
It had like this 70s, 80s slasher vibe on the one hand, and then a lot of the clothes is 90s, but then you've got modern technology that we don't even have, like the scallop shell e-reader. So I think this is all deliberate to give it this nebulous, surreal feeling that just, adds to that creepiness. What did it remind you of? I mean, I know I said Napoleon Dynamite. Was there anything that it reminded you of?
It definitely reminded me of 8 Mile. You know, there is a big element of 8 Mile that talks about these abandoned houses and how they get used for horrific acts. And there's a moment of rebellion where they burn one down where a little girl was assaulted. And so when they were driving through Detroit, I was very much reminded of that. And I thought, oh, how interesting to think of these abandoned houses as also being a refuge for someone. That's something that I never would have thought of.
Interesting.
You know, because the boyfriend's like hiding out there or whatever. Yeah,
that's creepy, where they finally find his house and he's got like all the cans on the window so he can warn himself when the thing has finally come back to get him. I love that detail.
Yeah, me too. And also, to your point about urban legend, it did remind me of that era of movies like, what was that? Disturbing Behavior movie.
I love Disturbing Behavior.
Holmes. I know, me too.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of a lot of just horror movies in general with horror tropes. Like, for example, in the first scene, we see Annie running in heels, and it's like, take your heels off.
I know. I mean, that is literally my first note is, why is this girl wearing heels in her house, and why is she still wearing them when she's running? And why does she run in that weird circle, which then I grew to understand. But at first I was like, dude, this is not the shortest distance between 2 points.
No, I think she's just giving herself time, right?
Yeah.
And then after Hugh and Jay have sex, she wakes up strapped to a chair in her underwear. So, you know, my first thought is, this is a slasher serial killer thing. What's happening next? And of course, it's not that.
I also made the note, why doesn't he let her wear clothes while he's showing her this horrific thing? She must be freezing.
Yes. Which goes back to your, what is this temperature? Because it kind of seems like fall, and sometimes they're wearing a lot of clothes, but then she's also in the pool, and they're kind of sunning themselves by the lake.
Yeah, they're at the lake at one point, and I'm like, oh, it must be summer. But I mean, I'm sure it gets cold at night in Detroit like it does lots of places.
Yeah. Then there's the other trope of sex as a death sentence. We go back to Scream.
Yep.
Yep. But I think the difference between this and all those other horror movies is that it's really sad, dispassionate sex. You know, not one sex scene is sexy because it's forcing the victim to victimize someone else, which would probably take the pleasure out of it because you're damning someone. So there's this sense of resignation. I feel like if this movie were made in the 70s or 80s, it would be like this raunchy horn fest, but it's very much not that.
Yeah, totally. Another trope that I wrote down was literally, has anyone ever left pornos in an alley?
Were there pornos in an alley? I don't remember that.
They come upon pornos in an alley. I think the friend who becomes the lover when he's hanging out with the sister, they like find a bunch of pornos in an alley, and it's like, when has that ever occurred? When has anyone ever left pornos?
So people like to keep their pornos, I guess, right? If you have them.
I would think so. Or just throw it out with the rest of your crap. Like, why would it be in an alley separately?
Yeah, and I must not have registered that scene at all because I can't remember that. There's a lot of strange sexual politics in this. You know, we've got the sex as a deadly sin, sex as a death sentence, going back to Randy in Scream, you can never have sex. But it doesn't feel like it's slut shaming.
No. I have a question, actually. So when she goes in the water, she sees all those like bros having their bro fishing day. Do you think she slept with all those guys?
I think she slept with at least one of them. I think that's the implication, that she's like,
yeah,
I got to pass this on.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Ugh.
And I imagine that wasn't a fun, sexy time for her. Probably pretty miserable. Yeah, because she seems miserable after it. There's that sense of dread and shame, you know, that you've done something you wish you hadn't. Some people say this is about mortality and the inevitability of death. There's a lot of references to aging. You know the girl, Yara, she's reading from the Scallop Shell Reader, that weird thing. And she's reading these quotes, you know, from The Idiot, which I had to look up, Dostoevsky's The Idiot. The quote is, "And the most terrible agony may not be in the wounds themselves, but in knowing for certain that within an hour, that within 10 minutes, then within half a minute, and now at this very instant, your soul will leave your body and you will no longer be a person. And this is certain. The worst thing is that it is certain." So there's these literary references, the fact that they're playing Old Maid at one point, that leads a lot of people to interpret this as a reflection on the inevitability of our own deaths, and that it is chasing us. I found an article that goes really deeply into it, and I'll put it in the show notes with all like the symbolism and the colors and the references. I don't feel like I want to go that deeply into it right here, but if you are interested in that, you can look it up.
Yeah, that is interesting. I definitely connected the quote to the danger, but I don't know that I really thought of it as, I mean, it makes sense now. I don't know that I see death as something horrific coming. I mean, I know it's coming at some point, but I don't know that I dread it the way that that quote would describe.
If it's coming at you like the entity in It Follows, it's pretty dreadful.
Sure. While I was watching it, I was like, this isn't scary. I'm not scared. I'm not scared of a sex monster, you know? But that night, when I woke up, I saw nothing but the old lady. And
so the old lady was your scariest?
1,000% the old lady walking through that schoolyard.
Well, that's another piece of evidence that supports the theory that this is about aging, that the first person to appear to Jay is an old woman. So are these different appearances of the entity related to Jay's fears? So is aging her fear? At one point when they're at the lake, like a little boy pops his head through the fence, and I think that's the same little boy that is peeping, like being a bit of a peeping Tom with her. There's that male gaze aspect, you know, there's little boys watching her in the pool, and I think there's at some point somebody watching her change, and Jay is viewed as this beauty, right? And everybody likes her. Paul has always had a crush on her, so she's somebody who's used to being looked at, admired, but there's also a lot of discomfort in that, being viewed as an object. So maybe that's another fear of hers. And then maybe there's the fear of sexual assault, because I feel like a lot of those entities appeared in a sexually threatening way, whether it was someone who had been the victim of sexual assault or was about to sexually assault her. You know, there's the man, the nudity, like half the time they're naked, which is scary.
Yeah, and the tall man totally gave me Twin Peaks vibes.
That is my scariest moment, when you think, okay, she's been scared by the person down in the kitchen, she's upstairs, her friends are like, it's okay. You've got that breaking of tension, and then it's like a second too long before he comes in, and then I think the noise, whatever the sound effect is particularly discordant, and that was what I was thinking of in the middle of the night when I woke up to go to the bathroom, was that tall man. And yeah, he looks like the tall man that we see in the Red Room in Twin Peaks, right?
Exactly, yeah.
My husband and kids were camping in the backyard that night, and that's a perfect time for me to watch a horror movie by myself. And that got to me, that scene, and I knew it was coming because this is the second time I've watched this movie, and I knew at some point that tall man is going to walk through that door, and it still got me. It's the best jump scare.
Yeah, I mean, when I was looking things up online after, it does seem like the tall man is the most popular threatening moment for people.
Eek. Well, yeah, I mean, I think also, so yeah, we've got, what do these things represent? Is it fear of sexual assault? Is it, and you know, the mom, when Greg gets it.
I mean, that was horrific.
So what was it going to do to her? And what did it do to Annie? Because that's another scene that really got me, and I forgot about that. And I actually felt quite guilty for recommending this to you when that scene happened. You know, when like we see Annie run away and then she's saying goodbye to her dad on the phone, and then it just cuts to her mangled body. And then I was like, oh, I feel bad I made Caroline watch this.
Yeah, I was like, I might need to remind Annie, gore is part of the reason that I prefer true crime because they usually,
Skirt around
out of
that.
respect for victims, it's blurry. You don't really have to see the details.
There's
The
no
phone
respect for
call
victims.
too was hard. Yeah, there's no respect for victims in horror movies.
No, absolutely
No.
not. What did you think of Greg?
I definitely did not get the right impression of their relationship in the beginning. Like in the beginning, it felt to me like, oh, he's more like longing for them than, like they were popular girls and he was like, oh, I wish I was cool enough. But then it's like, I guess it was kind of the other way around. I think his sister says something judgmental about them when the police are over at the house or whatever. But I thought that he was more wanting to be close to them. It sounds like at some point he hurt her emotionally.
Yeah, my impression was Greg was the cool guy.
Yeah, I did not get that. I don't know. I clearly I was not interpreting it correctly.
Why do you think Greg offered to take on the curse?
I don't know. First of all, I was like, they're just doing this in the hospital as if people aren't going to notice that. How often do nurses come in and interrupt you when you're staying in a hospital? But I guess maybe he also feels invincible.
Yeah, I thought it was a bit of ego, hubris, that he didn't really believe it and he just wanted to get laid. Like he's that kind of guy. But then
Yeah.
Paul comes at this from a different perspective. He legitimately wants to save Jay because he's head over heels in love with her, right? Why did he do it?
Yeah.
Like I know he knows it's real.
Well, I mean, clearly he thinks he can kill it because they have that whole scene at the end where they're like drawing it in.
Doesn't Paul sleep with Jay after the pool scene?
Yeah, so he thinks it's dead.
Okay, they do show the blood in the water.
Did the gun scene in the pool, by the way, remind you of Star Wars?
Star Wars.
And he's like shooting. Yeah, the scene in the desert where he's like, a little higher, just a little higher.
No.
Like, because he's like shooting. The thing is holding her leg in the water, but he can't see it,
Yes.
And
So you're saying when
he's
Lando
just, like, shooting
Calrissian
a
is being
gun.
dragged down.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
I
was
love
like,
it.
this is insane. He can't see what he's shooting at and how they're in water too. And I know they've done all these experiments about like what water does to bullets in terms of their speed and trajectory. In terms of things being unrealistic and fantastical, the whole pool situation, I was like, what is even going on here?
There's a lot of criticism for that pool scene as just not making sense. But I don't know. I didn't mind it.
1,000%.
What else are you going to do? You've got to try something, right? And I think they had noticed some kind of electrical signal with it. So maybe they thought they could electrocute it. And obviously that didn't work. But
Yeah, because I was confused. I was like, okay, they're putting all these electrical things around the pool because they're going to electrocute it. But then she's in the pool and she's in it for too long. And then the things start flying. And I'm just like, this was so ill conceived.
yes. Well, they are teenagers. Or I guess they're really they're more in college, right? But they're still
Yeah, they're college.
young and dumb, right? I don't know if I would have a better plan if I were that age.
Yeah. And I also, like, they're so lucky this pool was available. What is the deal with this pool? Why is it open? Why is there no one else there? Lucky it's lit and chlorinated. And,
Yeah.
I'm so confused by it in Detroit, too. I couldn't find something like that around me,
No.
It's just, like, available. Like, I don't think
That
so.
you could just get into. I don't know.
Right.
Because it looks like a nice pool.
It's totally clean.
It looks like it's in an asylum in the middle of an
Yeah.
open field. But the pool itself it's a nice pool.
Yeah, yeah. But the pool is what inspired next week.
I thought so. I was going to ask you that. Yes.
But I did make a note here. How are they already in the mood? Like about after that whole scene and then they have sex. I probably would not be in the mood to have sex, especially after she had sex with strangers just to get this thing off her. Like I just feel like my relationship with sex might need a recovery time period
Fair.
before,
I think they didn't think it was dead at that point. I think Paul, out of love for Jay, unrequited, I guess it's somewhat requited by the end, but is willing to sacrifice himself because then the next scene we see is him going off to find a sex worker to pass it on to. So why would he do that if he didn't believe it was still following him?
I don't think I registered that.
Now, I think they know it's not dead. They have sex. He takes it on. He goes and pays a sex worker and passes it to her on the assumption that she will pass it on pretty quickly, but it's not gone. And they know it. That's what I think.
Well, and that comes with the complication of this, the boyfriend from the beginning who's sleeping with as many people as possible, this thing at some point would get quite busy.
I don't think you can pass it on to multiple people. I think you pass it on to the first person. So like if you sleep with 10 people, I don't think it matters. It's just that first person. And if that person gets killed, it's back at you. And so you don't know when it's coming back.
Oh.
That was my impression. And I'm pretty sure Greg passes it on as well, because you see like Greg talking with some girls in a flirty way in like a cafeteria or a mall food court or something. So my impression is Greg used his charm to pass it on, even though he feels pretty invincible, and ultimately it doesn't work.
Yeah, I guess like I was thinking it would follow each one.
No, that's not my impression. I mean, who knows? The director says there's no logic to it. You can't really explain a nightmare. So that's another thing to keep in mind when we're talking about what it all means.
Yeah. Well, you know, they should be clearer.
They should be clear. Well, I think they are deliberately unclear. Yes, this is not a Scream rules where everything is really clear, right? What do you think she sees in the pool? Like at one point, you know, her sister says, "What do you see?" And she says that she doesn't want to say. Do you have a theory on that? There is a theory.
What's the theory? I don't have a theory.
It's her dad.
And her dad is dead?
Her dead dad.
Okay. Because I also was like, what is the deal with these parents? There's like one scene with parents talking.
The implication that something bad happened to the dad because Greg's family seems judgmental of their family. The mom seems to be disengaged and drinking, and they don't even consider going to parents for help. It's not on their radar at all. But it's not just their parents, it's Greg's parents as well, I think, because when they go off to the lake, it's like, well, nobody's going to even notice I'm gone.
Yeah, but that's another kind of trope of whenever there's something about teenagers, their parents have to be, only the Walshes are engaged in their children. Every other parent is in the whole world is not. The Walshes and the Learys.
I guess if you want teenage protagonists to be in charge, you have to write the parents out in some way. But 100%. They don't write the parents out. The entity appears as the parents, I think. You know, it definitely appears as Greg's mom. And then a lot of people are saying the reason she won't tell her sister what she sees is because she's seeing her dead father, which is particularly frightening, especially if he is ultimately going to assault her, which is what happened to Greg. And I think the most disturbing scene, even if it's maybe not the goriest scene.
Yes, I wrote Greg and his mom. Okay, I used a 4-letter word.
Okay.
It's bad what I wrote.
At the end, Jay and Paul are holding hands, and you can see somebody in the background. What do you think's going on there? Do you think that's it?
I mean, I think that's the implication, is that it's it. And it would make sense. I mean, I definitely have questions about the speed of this thing, because I know they say it's slow but not stupid. And you see the speed of it most of the time. And I guess the tall guy is the fastest moving version of it, which might also be why he's freaky or play into it subconsciously. They have that scene at the lake. She drives away. She gets in an accident that nobody really witnesses. She goes into a cornfield, so she's not on the road. But somehow someone comes upon it, calls an ambulance. The ambulance makes it there, gets her out, and brings her to the hospital before the thing makes... She was driving for like 1 minute.
Right. Yeah, why didn't it catch up with her then?
I feel like it definitely would have caught her in the car before the ambulance got there.
Caught up and dragged her out. But yeah, there's certain gaps where it seems to take a long time to catch her and then catch up with her way too quickly. What would you do if this thing were following you and you figured out the rules? Where would you go? How would you do this?
I mean, I'd probably just die.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, I don't know that it would be worth it. First of all, I am not going to give it to somebody. Absolutely not. I mean, sex is an incredibly intimate thing for me personally. I know that for other people, it's not, and kudos to them. But it would be quite hard for me to do it with that intention going on. And then also, I just wouldn't want to live my whole life looking over my shoulder. I wouldn't sleep. You know, it would be torture.
So you'd do what Annie did and just wait for it?
No, I'd probably just kill myself. I wouldn't let it get me. Like, I would probably just drive really far because it's slow and get a bunch of pills or something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking I would just kind of keep going back and forth a lot.
Well, you know, you have bases across the globe, you know, like...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What if you just left the country? Could it get on a plane?
I was talking to my husband about it, and he was like, why wouldn't you just fly somewhere? And I'm like, I don't think these kids have the money for a plane ride. But yes, that's a good point. You could fly somewhere.
You can put it off, but you can never escape it. It will come to get you at some point. Eek.
Which is why I would just take care of the situation myself, because I could not live like that.
Yeah.
That would be too much.
So what do you think is the real horror beneath the surface? Or is it just the thing? There's the inevitability of your own death. There's growing up, the fear of growing up. And there's another interpretation that it's about loss of innocence, that, once you have entered that sexual world, you can't go back. There's that scene right at the beginning when they're at the movies. And I think they're going to see Charade, which is one of my favorite Audrey Hepburn movies. And they play the trade game where they point out people they'd switch with. And at first you think, well, this is just about setting up that scary moment where she can't see the person he's pointing out. But then he also points to the little kid. And there's that idea that he's so happy and he's innocent and he has his life ahead of him. And they don't anymore, right? Because they've entered that adult world. And that adult world is scary and full of risk.
That element, too, I think was hard for me to connect with because, we just went camping for a week and I picked up the dogs at the dog sitter. And I think about how the dogs get in the car and they never have any idea what this is about, how long we're going to be in the car for, what even is going on. And I see our kids' lives being so much like that. And I just think maybe I'm too much of a control freak to have any desire to be a child again. So much is out of your control when you're a kid. And I know they're dealing with something that's out of their control for sure, but they certainly could do more about it than a child would be able to in any situation,
Yeah, I don't think I'd go back to childhood either.
I guess part of the horror is what humans will do to save themselves. All of these people who did sleep with people to get the thing pointed at a new target. It's a horrific thing to think about. There's even been cases about people intentionally giving each other AIDS and stuff like that, That I think is the real nightmare because the other part is obviously so fantastical and fictional. It's hard to think about that being scary except for the literal image of those things walking at you, which is...
Yeah, that's a really good point. What people will do to save themselves, who they'll throw under the bus. In relation to Paul's, and perhaps Jay, I'm not sure if she was complicit in this. Was there a plan to pass it on to the sex worker? What does that say about the way the characters, but also we as a society, value human life? It's only implied, and maybe the implication is that Paul thinks about it, but doesn't go through with it. But if he does, I want to know whether he told her the way Hugh told Jay to at least give this woman a chance, or was this sex worker merely a stopgap to give them a bit of time? They knew she was going to die and they didn't care. And maybe that's the plan, to give Jay and Paul time between when the entity attacks them. And that's truly horrifying because if that is their plan, they've turned evil to preserve their own lives and happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is horrifying to think that this happened to Jay by someone who knew her. That is one form of betrayal. It is also awful thinking about she goes to the boat, and even if they're drunk fishing bros early in the morning, they still have value as human beings. So that is horrific. And then obviously the time they dedicate to transferring this to a sex worker is so minuscule that I didn't even catch it. It really does show a lack of value in the life of that person, which is horrible and which is certainly the way that many institutions approach this, et cetera. But, sex work is work, and there is no reason to devalue that human being because that's their line of work.
I think, yeah, and then what you said about the bros on the boat, I think that's such an interesting setting that they chose for Jay to pass it on. A group of drinking men that you don't know as a young woman is scary. Frat parties are scary. I'm sure we've all been in situations over the years with that power dynamic and sense of vulnerability when if that group of guys really wanted to do something horrible to you, they absolutely could. And we all have Me Too stories. But in this case, the one victimizing this group of men is Jay. And we know that whoever she slept with on that boat got killed because the entity comes back for her again after that boat scene. So I thought that was an interesting flipping of the script, the way she passes it on to the people who traditionally are more likely to be the threatening ones. But in this case, she's the threat. And it's not her fault that she's the threat, but she does make that choice to kill someone else. I think it's also interesting, just a little, aside, the difficulty in passing it on between men and women, particularly a beautiful young woman like Jay. Hugh has to, date Jay, right? She's not going to sleep with him on the first night. He has to really woo her. But on the other hand, like Jay got Paul and Greg like tripping over themselves to sleep with her, even though they know it's a deadly curse because they just want to get into Jay's pants. So all Jay has to do is walk up to that group of bros and she's done, at least for a while, until one of them gets killed. But it's a lot harder for Paul and Jay. Like they have to pay someone, they have to date someone to get that curse passed along.
And while we're on this, like I'm just registering at this moment as we're talking about this, how heteronormative all of this is. You know, there is not any even hint that people who are bi or gay or whatever are experiencing this, which is interesting.
Yes. I'm not sure what it means, but it is worth noting.
Honestly, I think it means they didn't even think of them. You know,
Yeah.
like I'm sure it's just a matter of not considering that normal.
Yes.
You know, and clearly, which way is the worst way to be devalued? Is it by being an assigned tolerable victim or just forgotten altogether? Yeah. I don't know.
Yes. Well, in the case of the entity, I'd rather be forgotten than victimized the way the sex worker was. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What do we learn about survival? Is there any message that we can take away from this for the anxiety prone amongst us?
I would only just harken back to kind of my earlier thought about survival. I mean, the horrific element of it. Some people will do some pretty terrible things.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps it's a message about the dangers of casual sex. Maybe it's live your life despite the threat that hangs over all of us of growing up and dying. Maybe it's depend on your friends. I don't know. She does depend on her friends a lot. They really are there for her, which is nice.
The sister relationship is very strong. Because I was worried at one point with Paul, right, that there would be some sort of beef over the way he views one sister versus another, but it just seems like everyone's totally supportive. So that was lovely.
Yes. Would you recommend this?
Maybe.
Obviously, I would. I did.
Yeah. I mean, I did specifically take out my phone and show clips of the thing slowly walking to my husband because I was like, you need to understand what's been like keeping me up.
Does he like horror?
He does, but he likes more like Black Mirror type, you know, like psychological.
Existential horror.
Yeah. Science, you know, nerdy stuff.
Mangled bodies on a shoreline is not really his thing.
No, but I don't think he minds them either because he recreationally plays like war games and stuff where things die horrifically and bloody. But
my husband is not a horror guy either. He'll usually watch something with me on Halloween or my birthday to indulge me, but horror is usually something that I do when he's out. I would recommend this just because I love the slow burn, relentless quality of the entity. I like the way they mess with horror movie tropes that we've previously discussed. And I also, something we haven't mentioned is the creepy synthetic 80s movie sort of score that reminds me of like Halloween and Stranger Things. So yeah, I loved it. Obviously, it was the first movie I recommended on this podcast, so came up pretty quickly. I also love that it's low budget and it was really successful. So I love when a low budget movie makes it big. So that makes me happy.
Totally, me too. And it also wasn't incredibly long, you know, like it was a totally pleasant amount of time.
Yeah.
And I liked, you know, the fashion as well.
The fashion was fun, yeah. So Caroline, you don't have a palate cleanser for us this week, but my palate cleanser is rewatching season 1 of Schitt's Creek.
Because so good.
It's just so delightful. And I love David's expressions and I love Annie's selfishness. Not Annie. That's her real name. Annie Murphy.
Her real name. Yeah.
Alexis. I love Alexis. I love all of them. And it just makes me smile. So if you're looking for a palate cleanser after the grimness of this movie, and whether you've seen it before or you haven't seen it, check out Schitt's Creek. It's a delight.
Yeah. And really the emotional arc that every character in that show goes on is just so beautiful. It's lovely.
It's pretty much a perfect show. Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, if you like this, you should watch 8 Mile. I already had that on my list of things to recommend, so I'm glad that you said that too. You should watch Barbarian, also for the setting, that kind of grim, abandoned Detroit setting. The pool scene, there's the movie and the book, Let the Right One In, which is a vampire movie that is so good. And it ends on a pool scene. If you're interested in the relentless nature of the entity, I recommend The Ring with Samara, and Smile is about a passed on curse. I haven't seen Smile 2 yet, but Smile really reminded me of this. Obviously, there's the Terminator movies, which I'm thinking about showing my kids for the first time coming up. And then Halloween, right? Because it's got that nightmarish, dreamlike quality. There's an entity that moves slowly but is inescapable. Years might pass and Michael Myers will still come back for Laurie, as many sequels can attest to.
I would add Scream, like,
Scream.
because the trope element of it, as soon as I was like, oh, this is about sex, the first thing I thought of was Scream, and Halloween. And what's the camp one? Friday
the 13th?
Is it Friday the 13th?
Friday the 13th. I was wondering if you were talking about Sleepaway Camp, because that's a very different camp.
No,
not Sleepaway Camp.
I think I always just got Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street mixed up, but it's definitely Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
And Disturbing Behavior, because why not?
Oh, I love Disturbing Behavior.
No, me too.
I haven't seen it in probably decades, but I think I need to watch that again.
Yeah. And The Ring, I will say, since you mentioned The Ring, I think the relentless aspect too, I think also I think I figured out a fix element is a good thing. And The Ring is one of the, I think, only 3 movies in my life that I saw in the theater more than once.
Wow. We should rewatch The Ring, because I remember that came out when we were in college, and I think it was senior year. The Ring was really big, right?
Yes.
That was when I was into that Tai Bo video. Do you remember? Like Billy Blank's kickboxing. And I used to set up somehow 2 TVs, which, back then we didn't really have, did we even have laptops then? I don't know. I feel like I had a desktop computer, but somehow I would set up The Ring on TV and my Billy Blank's Tai Bo kickboxing video on another screen. And I remember once I was home alone. I was doing my kickboxing by myself, watching The Ring at the same time, and slowly it got darker and darker and darker. And I really scared myself, even though I was doing this silly kickboxing video, because Samara is horrifying.
Absolutely, especially her jump scare.
Yeah, let's not talk about The Ring too much, because maybe we'll do it in the future. I think we've got 5 or 6 movies we've said now that we have to talk about later.
Funny. I was just at a campsite, and on the TV screens, Toy Story 2 was playing, and there was a guy sitting and waiting to use the bathroom. And I looked up and I was like, lousy try, Brian. Like, I quoted Toy Story 2. And the guy was like, you must have kids. And I was like, yes, but that's not why I know this movie by It's because
Toy Story 2 was your college movie.
I would watch, I had it in the VCR. My roommate and I loved to watch Forensic Files before bed, but then we were too scared to go to sleep. So we would watch 20 minutes of Toy Story 2 after Forensic Files. So if you need a palate cleanser too, Toy Story 2, the bloopers
Toy Story 2
in particular is
I remember you watching those bloopers over and over and over again. Toy Story 4, on the other hand, I think could be classified as a horror movie.
Agree. 1,000%.
Maybe we should do that one too. Okay. Do you want to give us our next homework assignment?
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, or dropped earlier, inspired by the pool scene, I requested that Annie watch the Fox Hollow Murders, the docuseries. I think it's 3 parts.
I think it's 4. I've finished 2 episodes and I'm going to watch the next 2. Yeah.
Okay. It's very quick, even though it's 4 parts. Like I watched one evening and 3 more the next morning. So.
Okay. It's on Hulu in the US and Disney Plus in Australia, which is a weird choice for Disney, but there it is.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for listening. Please do all the things podcasters ask you to do. Tell a friend, write a review on iTunes. You can email us at drawn2darknesspod@gmail.com if you'd like to offer any feedback. We apologize for any audio issues we've had in these early episodes. We're learning, we're adjusting mics, figuring out how to edit. Hang in there, we'll get better. And finally, if you, like Shirley Jackson, delight in what you fear, join us in 2 weeks here at Drawn to Darkness. Special thanks to Nancy Azzano for our cover art. You can find her on Facebook at Nancy Azzano Art, and Harry Kidd for our intro and outro music. You can find him on Spotify.